Okay guys, in this video today we're going to be taking another look at Cardano to see what has been happening to the ADA price on the short term and obviously give our thoughts and expectations of where we think ADA is going to go in the longer term. Obviously there's lots of various articles out there today and videos on YouTube saying about realistic prices for Cardano. So we're going to go through what my realistic price expectations are for Cardano based on the data that we have available today. And obviously do a little bit of speculation on where we think things might go with some new fundamentals adjusting the technical data as we go through the second half of this year. Guys, as we get into this video, if you find it useful and informative, hit that like button. I really appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you hit subscribe, tap the bell, and hit on all notifications and you won't miss another Cardano update. Right, with this said, let's take a look at what's going on here with Cardano. So here we have ADA to the USDT. We are on the weekly chart and Binance is the data source. Now here we have obviously lots of different support and resistance lines, and we also have the 5 impulse waves to the upside, the Elliott theory, wave 1 obviously starting off in March of 2020. Everyone can remember the low points down there. And this is actually pretty much the low point for the bear market, and that really ticked us over into starting the bull run. We also have the correction of wave 2. This was around July, August, going down into the later part of December for many altcoins. Then we go into wave 3, which obviously peaked out, I think it was like April time. I think that was, at least it was April for, or May, I should say, for Cardano here. And obviously the fourth wave that we're currently kind of in, we found a pretty interesting bottom level here, although there's always the possibility of going down a little bit lower. I don't think this is going to happen, and I'll go through why this is in a moment. And then obviously we have the fifth wave. Now the fifth wave I've actually put up there at $10. That's where this one actually kind of signals it in. And obviously there's a few things that we have to consider as to why $10, right? It's a psychological barrier for one. The second reason that $10 is something that's relatively realistic is when you take a look at Elliott theory, wave 3 is always going to be your biggest wave. So you're expecting wave 5 generally to be shorter than your wave 3. Now, obviously, that means that you could be anywhere, as long as there's an upper limit, you probably aren't going to go to $20 or so, maybe 25 is a bit of a push, right? But ultimately what you'll find is there's a bit of a limit on how far you can push wave 5. With this being said, of course, the Fibonacci retracement tools also give you a pretty good expectation of where things are likely to go when you start pushing back to the upside after a correction. And in the case of Cardano at the moment, that actually shows us $7.20. So we see lots of realistic price targets out there, lots of price predictions for Cardano during 2021. These sometimes might be $50, $100, $20, whatever, right? Sometimes they're super low. They're really conservative. Sometimes they're only $5. Maybe they're only $2, $2.50, $3, right? Even though some of these targets have kind of already been hit with those $2 ranges, people still call those out as potentially the high. And they often get these things kind of confused with market capitalization. And when we talk about market cap, all we're really doing is a simple calculation between the current market value and, of course, the circulating supply. Those two numbers multiplied together give you the market capitalization. It's not, and it's a notional value. What it is not is the amount of money that's inside of cryptocurrency. So it's not a factor or a barrier to stop you from thinking of a price target. The real factors that come into play here in order pushing up the price of a specific cryptocurrency is the supply and the demand. Now, Cardano is the world's most decentralized network. It's the world's most decentralized network because a large portion, a very, very significant portion, is actually delegated and staked, and therefore it's not actually readily available to purchase straight off exchanges. Of course, as prices do start to rise, some of those staked coins do actually end up back on an exchange and obviously will be sold. But what I'm trying to get across here, guys, is the supply is much, much lower than the circulating supply as indicated on something like CoinMarketCap. This being said, as soon as you start getting significant volume demand or FOMO during this fifth wave, the price is going to surge rapidly. And this is going to be testament to the fact that so much is currently out of circulation and is actually being delegated. So this is a huge factor for Cardano. Now, of course, when we talk about Cardano, and we talk about price expectations of ADA, we also have to consider a few additional things. Here inside the technical data, we obviously have our price expectations somewhere between $7.20 and $10. Those, in my opinion, are super realistic, regardless to what people say about market capitalization. And what we have here is obviously technical data that only really looks at what has already happened. It does not take into consideration anything that is going to happen. And what I mean by this is obviously smart contracts are just around the corner. And when we see that smart contract functionality actually go ahead and hit the mainnet, we're going to see dApps and businesses migrating from Ethereum over to Cardano. That is going to also change this technical data for the better. Obviously, more dApps, more use case, more reasons to transact with ADA. This being said, obviously means that we are going to see a significant bump in price. That's going to adjust the technicals, and we're going to have to recap and reanalyze as we progress through. Along with, obviously, the migration of existing applications from Ethereum to Cardano, we are also likely to see, or we are going to see, in fact, new dApps being built specifically for the Cardano ecosystem. This in itself is another huge milestone for Cardano, but also is going to increase the adoption and the use of ADA, and therefore will adjust the technical data once again. So again, when we start talking about realistic price expectations, obviously the Fibonacci extension level of the 4.236 is already indicating $7.20. With all this additional use case and reasons to be transacting with ADA added to the network, I do feel that a $10 price target is super realistic. Now, obviously, as we get into this technical analysis as well, to give you a bit of the short-term price expectations, it's always good to understand what my expectations are from a realistic point of view and what the data is telling me from the bigger, broader picture. So during 2021, 2022, this kind of bull run that we're in, that wave 5 for me is going to peak out up there somewhere between $7.20 and $10. And again, we'll adjust our analysis as we get more data available to us. Now let's talk about what's been going on. Here we obviously have the weekly charts, and there's a few things that are worth pointing out right now. Obviously, we have the 5 impulse waves to the upside that we spoke about. We obviously have our resistance and support lines, currently just below the $1.19 support. But one of the key things about this weekly chart that's really important to understand is the stochastic relative strength index, which is this line, or these two lines just down at the bottom here. And what we see is these waving around as we have different price movements, right? Price moves up, price pulls down, and ultimately it also tracks momentum ultimately. Okay, so what you have with the stochastic relative strength index is something that is super sensitive to price movements for ADA here, and this is really cool to look at on the weekly chart, because what you see during the March crash of 2020, when we basically hit the bottom of the bear market, we actually had the stochastic relative strength index go down all the way to 1. Okay, anything lower than 20 is oversold, but it went down all the way to 1. Now, obviously, during this first wave, we actually rose ourselves up towards 98. Obviously, anything above 80 is overbought. So we were overbought at this point, and we were due a pullback. We saw this with wave 2. And obviously, the sentiment in the market was pretty good. It wasn't fearful, it wasn't extreme fear or anything like that. And as a result, we actually protected a lot of the price discovery that we had during wave 1, whilst we corrected down on wave 2. This actually brought us back down to our lower levels of the stochastic relative strength index, and it actually came down to basically just above 0 at 0.4. And then we started to go into wave 3. And obviously wave 3 was significantly higher than wave 1. And again, we brought this all the way up to 100 on that stochastic relative strength index. And obviously from here, we had to pull down because we were overbought. So a correction was due. This was the 4th wave correction. Now, because wave 2 was flat, wave 4 was sharp, and that is just how Elliott theory works, and again, is in line with the theory, so nothing too strange there either. So we basically pulled the stochastic all the way down. We obviously had that bounce once we found that initial selling climax for Bitcoin. We pushed back up a little bit, and we obviously saw that here, and have fallen back down to these lower areas. Now, ultimately, the stochastic RSI has come down to 2.4. which is indicating to us that we've almost found the bottom here for wave 4 and the correction of this wave. This therefore is indicating that we're almost at time to push into wave 5, where we go ahead and start to see some new price discovery for ADA. So along with my realistic price expectations, it's also really important to also understand what metrics are actually in the background, above and beyond that of just candlesticks and wicks. Ultimately, what you have here is a stochastic relative strength index that's super sensitive to price movements, that is in the exact same positioning that it was during the bottom of the crash in March of 2020 and the low of our second wave within the Elliott wave theory to the upside. This means that wave 4 is very, very close to being completely bottomed out, and we're ready to go ahead and move to the upside for wave 5. Of course, we could start to see more manipulation in the space for Bitcoin. And again, what you might see here is a push to the upside only to fall down a little bit lower. Again, this is manipulation in the space, and the technical analysis actually helps you understand what's going on with that manipulation. Contrary to popular belief, technical analysis is actually really, really useful when the markets are being manipulated, because guess what, guys? Those institutions are using technical indicators and technical patterns to trade out retail investors. So understanding what they are doing and finding their patterns in the charts actually give you a competitive edge and to know what to expect coming further forward. It's not just gambling. So with this being said, let's take a look at what is going on down at the hourly view here for Cardano. I will zoom out and just make this a little bit bigger and zoom in. So here we can obviously see that we've had a bit of a downward trend. We have obviously kind of stabilized around that $1.19 area of support. We are actually just below this area, but we have, of course, that stochastic relative strength index indicating that we are heading down to the oversold area. So I feel that we'll probably bottom this out if we did need to go down any lower at $1.16 before we start getting a reversal and trading back up again. And as we can see, we actually did deviate away from a short-term trend line here. There's a trend line formed just around here. Although it's not 100% accurate, we get to a rough kind of picture here. We were basically testing this this downward trend several times, and then we broke out. So we're looking now for a back test down to this area, and I think at 116 would basically tick that off for us if we were to drop down any lower. So that would be basically confirming that this resistance trend line is now a support trend line. Again, we would like to get above $1.19, and I do think that's going to be on the horizon shortly, so we'll watch that closely. But this is another milestone since we have been down trading or trending downwards since the 12th of July, and this is a significant break to the upside on that trend. So on the shorter time frames, that's really encouraging. If we do zoom on out, it's also worth pointing out that we were inside a head and shoulder pattern. Let me just grab my head and shoulders here. So what you can see was basically this was the neckline. Here was your shoulder. I'll just quickly draw this on for you guys so you can see what we're talking about. We can see down here how we had our shoulder also forming, and then obviously this was our neckline just here. So this head and shoulder pattern, we obviously fell down past the neckline, retested it, failed, and that really triggered us off to a downward trend. Now, with that being said, obviously this is going to be indicating this break up to the upside now, and potential push is going to be hopefully the test to go back up to this area of 128 of that original neckline to see if we can get a reversal on that. So again, we'll be monitoring that situation on the shorter time frames. But again, for me personally, as a long-term investor in Cardano and knowing what is likely to come in the future here, and considering that everything that we are talking about for Cardano is super long-term, then actually it's important that we don't get too bogged down on those hourly candles and those smaller time frames and those micro price movements. Instead, have a good vision of the future and seeing where Cardano is going. With so many different relationships around the world, Cardano is a growing ecosystem, and it hasn't even got smart contract functionality just yet. And what do we think is going to happen once we have smart contract functionality, once we get that scalability solution and that governance? Once the roadmap is completed, we've obviously heard from Frederick over at the Cardano Foundation that they are targeting banks and the S&P 500. So these are massive things for the adoption of Cardano. And guys, hopefully you have found this video useful and informative. If you have, then do go ahead and hit that like button for me. I really do appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you subscribe, hit the bell, and tap on all, and you won't miss another Cardano update. Guys, with this said, done, and out of the way, I hope everyone has a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.